Welcome to Meeting the Inconceivable, a podcast exploring Zen koans, dreams, and the creative life produced by Pacific Zen Institute. Pacific Zen has a legacy of preserving and reimagining the koan tradition to meet our own times. With a lively community of artists, innovators, and seekers of all kinds that extends worldwide, our mission is to create a culture of transformation through meditation, koans, the arts, and conversations about the deepest matters. In this episode, Roshi John Tarrant speaks from deep in a winter sesshin dedicated to the miscellaneous koan collection. Taking up an infamous koan which tells of a woman who raises a goose in a bottle and then asks how to free the goose without breaking the bottle or harming the goose. Tarrant points to the many bottles we may feel trapped in, and how awakening is never about solving our problems, but dissolving the constraints of the mind.
The koan, I'm going to talk on a koan today. And one of the miscellaneous koans, famous koan. And as I said, we've added koans we added a whole bunch of koans to this, mainly me, but also Joan Sutherland. Some other people made some suggestions, but it was mainly Joan and me. And this is one that I just always really liked, and is a woman raised a goose in a bottle. The goose grew, and she wanted to get it out of the bottle. Part of the plot is she didn't want to break the bottle or harm the goose. How will she get it out? And it's a sort of koan that you'll hear around the place. And I've even heard in corporate things with people with kind of truly stupid answers, actually, in corporate trainings, referring to it. But that's not uncommon with koans, People take them over and do weird things with clapping the one hand or something. But there's something wonderful. It doesn't really matter what uses people make of a koan, because it'll get to them anyway. There's that sort of wonderful thing. I had a friend who was on with a touring band that he was the promoter for, and kind of pretty much the manager for. And as is often the way on a tour, the wheels started to come off, and he was somewhere in Argentina, and the band, and you need a certain discipline for a band to make money and to succeed and all that sort of thing. So, and he told me in an outraged way, they were letting one of them, the bass player's cousin, decide the itinerary. That it really annoyed him. And he thought, I'm just going to quit and come back home. And then he heard this koan about the goose in the bottle. And the problem went away. He just didn't do anything. It resolved itself. He didn't quit. The bass player's cousin stopped running the itinerary, things like that. So there's this sort of rather sweet quality about this koan. It deals with your suffering by sort of disappearing it. You're not in the bottle anymore. And something that really, the bottle might be the circumstances you're raised in. And I heard this great story about the great blues guitar player, Buddy Guy. I think he might even still be alive and playing in his late 80s and being trotted on stage. Those great legendary figures. And when he was a kid, he saw a guitar. And so he tried to make one out of bits of wood and rubber bands and wire. And that's how he became his first guitar as a little kid. And he did something which you've probably seen or know about this. So he's sometimes called a diddly guitar. It's a kind of one-string zither, and it's made. You stick a couple of nails in a board and put fencing wire or baling wire between them. And then you put between the nails, and then you put a glass bottle underneath, which acts as the slide and the fretboard, and you pluck it. And if you really want to get fancy, you put a cigar box underneath to resonate. and, and and I think that's really like, I will never afford a guitar. That's really a goose coming out of the bottle. And a lot of young kids in the South and Mississippi and places, that was their first guitar. And here's a Buddy Guy song. Here's the lyrics for a Buddy Guy song. Down here, the river meets the sea, and in the sticky heat, I feel you open up to me. Love comes out of nowhere, baby, just like a hurricane, and it feels like rain, and it feels like rain. It's great. Bluesy song. And there was a notable performer. This is in the dimension of what it's like when the goose is out of the bowl. There's a notable performer on that. It was called a diddley bow, that one string guitar. And there was a Mississippi blues guy whom I don't know about called Lonnie Pitchford. And he used to demonstrate the instrument by stretching a wire between two nails hammered into the wood of a vertical beam, making part of the front porch of his house. So when you came into his house, you could play, and there's a glass bottle underneath that, and you can move it up and down and pluck the string. and when he died, his family, and there was a headstone in the Mountain Zion, paid for by the Mountain Zion Memorial Fund. And his headstone is designed with a playable diddley bow on the side. Even death didn't stop the goose getting out of the bottle with him. So I think that thing about my friend, and suddenly he just heard the koan. He didn't work with the koan. He didn't, he just, and when you just hear about the way, you just show up here in the temple, it's something. Like something, invisible paths begin to open for you. And it's a true thing, it's an exhilarating thing. Part of that goose being out of the bottle is that feeling of exhilaration that, one has a lot. If you do a lot of practice, then lots of things become wonderful. Or either that or my judgment is just completely deteriorated. In a way, that's what awakening is. You stop finding fault with everything. And you just reject what's not true, and the real naturally appears like that. And the koan's always about you, and it's always about your life. It's never an exercise somewhere else. It's never about the life you think you would be having if you were better this or that, or somebody loved you better or whatever, somebody treated you right. And so there's one of the things is it's kind of hard that the whole don't know quality of Zen and of koans in general. So you don't know which direction to set off in. And that's kind of incredibly disturbing at first. And later on, it's part of the exhilaration, because any direction will be the right one. Knock on any door, it will open, someone will answer that thing. And not knowing which way to head for often leads us to pretend that we know, but we don't have to do that. It's better not to pretend we know which direction we're heading in. And then the not knowing gradually becomes on our side, and the dignity of the path and the koan, if you just hear the koan, something takes you up, and your footsteps start to take a true direction. And there's a couple of stories about this koan. It's obviously a predicament koan. We have classifications for koans, which are kind of silly, really, but I enjoy it. So it makes the whole thing sound respectable. There are categories for types for koans, and And I would just want to repeat that thing. As soon as you hear a koan, things start to change for you. They change in your heart, and they change in the way you step in the world, and the way you regard the world, the way you just look. If you look at the windows, and the faces here, you start to see the nobility in them, and the beauty in them, and also you realize, oh, I'm seeing what's in me. That beauty and nobility is in the one who sees. And, world upon world, the faces, like the Hubble telescopes and the galaxies upon galaxies, and neuron upon neuron inside the body. More neurons even than galaxies, as far as we know. Thought upon thought. And the Kanzeon Sutra of eternal life, which is why we chant it for people stepping out the door. Thought after thought arises in the mind. Thought after thought is the mind. So it's just these bubbles and balloons, or a galaxy. So a couple of stories about the goose in the bottle. There was a really well-known scholar, if you're in the Buddhist world, there's a really well-known scholar in Honolulu called Dr. Chong. And he lived there was a zendo in Honolulu at that time, it's no longer there, called Koko-an, which just means this place here. And he was a respectable Chinese scholar. Chinese can do scholarship really well, as you know. It's a great literate culture of memorizing poems for exams and things like that. Amazing, tradition of learning. And so he was in that, and he thought he would study koans and become a truly knowledgeable about koans. But he never had any intention to be touched by them. He wanted to study them as a scholar. For him, a scholar was a venerable occupation, and being a Zen teacher was not. And so it wasn't that it wasn't, but it wasn't comprehensible in the same way. And in the course of his researches, as will happen, he ran across this koan about the goose in the bottle. And it seized his mind like that. Now, koan will do that, like it did my friend touring with the band, But many koans, there are many stories of koans suddenly grabbing you. And I think that's a good thing, So if it grabs you, you say thank you. And if it really grabs you, you won't be able to get away. And so he searched the ancient Chinese texts in vain for a solution. He wanted an answer to the koan that would set his heart to rest. And Honolulu was, depending on the season of the year, but it's about 5 hours different from the East Coast. But he got hold of the phone number of the great Japanese teacher, Daisetsu Suzuki, who was a professor, but he was really, before that, he was a koan master. And had come out of the great koan mills in Japan. And he called him on the phone, but he didn't. He just called him when his obsession grew strong enough. And it was midnight in New York when he called him. He called him from Honolulu. So, and he said, Dr. Suzuki, this is Dr. Chong. The goose in the bottle koan. I can't sleep. I can't rest. How do I solve it? You must tell me. And Suzuki immediately, like having been woken out of sleep, said, Dr. Chong. Yes? What about your goose? And at that moment, said Dr. Chong, the goose popped out of the bottle. So suddenly he was free, and he was at ease and full of joy. And thereafter, he always referred to Dr. Suzuki as his teacher and sensei, his sensei in that sense. And, the Chinese are often a little snobbish about the Japanese scholars. So there was a great concession on his part, a great acknowledgement of what Suzuki had done for him. And I used to stroll to meditation down the street that Dr. Chong lived on in Honolulu for some years. For some years I strolled out, and Honolulu being Honolulu, there are often flowers falling from the trees. And Dr. Chung would be out there sort of sweeping this sort of sea foam of blossoms, sweeping his garden, sweeping the paths. And I'd sort of nod to him as I walked by, and he nodded. And so it gave us a kind of delight to walking to the Zendo. And so a koan is a kind of beginning, I might say. It's a good beginning. It's meant to pull you into something. And in fact, when he was obsessed, he was in Honolulu and caught by the koan and couldn't find a response, he was already in a good place. And that was already a good thing. And then it opened him up. And so a koan will do that. But really, it's the universe opening us up. We stop holding things off. We stop trying to cling to what isn't true or isn't real. And then the real naturally appears, but it appears in us and as us. And the thicket of thoughts is no longer such a problem. And so when you you just have to step, I suppose the thing I'm saying, you have to step into the way. And last night I read a great tumble of koans. I read every koan in the miscellaneous koans. I actually didn't count them. There are 75 the way I've categorized them, but many koans have like 5 parts. So 5 koans in them. Somebody claimed there were 300, but I don't know really. I doubt it, but maybe. And I could count them, but it seems somehow disappointing. And so when I read that great tumble of koans, you can tell there's something is going on that's different from the normal things we do. The normal things, ways we make sense, the normal things we're virtuous, the normal ways we care for life, And the secret of caring for life is to step into that great impossibleness of the koans. And so it's a kind of it's an obstacle, but it's also a gate and a doorway. And if you have a koan with you like that, I mean, you're kind of lucky. So let it follow you around like a dog, or whatever follows you around. And what's going on in your mind, if you look at it, it's not that interesting anyway. So let the koan be in your mind. And if you've got, maybe it feels like rain, maybe you've got a song in your mind, feels like rain. That's right, but let the koan in as well. Goose in the bottle, like that. And so here's a funny kind of koan. It's the same koan, really, and it relates to one of the great masters of our tradition. And Shi Shuang Jing Kong was associated with, there's a person banged on a coffin and said alive or dead, and his teacher wouldn't tell him. And so he got really mad. The guy got really mad and hit his teacher. And so then he had to leave because just courtesy. If you hit your teacher, you're probably going to leave the temple for a while. And then he came back. His teacher died, but Shi Shuang was the person who took over the temple. And then people would come from all over to see Shi Shuang. And during the dark time when Buddhists were being killed, Shi Shuang lived with the potters and the clay makers outside town, And But anyway, somebody asked Shishuang, why did Bodhidharma come from the west? And the master answered, let's say someone's down in a 1,000-foot well. If you can get him out without using a rope, I'll tell you why Bodhidharma came from the west. And the student said, Master Chang of Hunan is also talking like this. And Shishuan threw him out. He said, drag this corpse. This is just like trying to make nice conversation. Throw him out of here, drag him out of here. And the person that had to do that was Yang Shan, Weiji. And later, Yang Shan didn't know the answer either. So he thought, oh no. So he went to another teacher called Dan Yuan and said, how can you get the man out of the well? And Dan Yuan said, ignoramus, who is in the well? Yang Shan didn't understand. So he went on and he talked to his next teacher, was Guishan, the famous lineage holder that we know well, and told the story of how do you get him out of the well. And Guishan called out, Weiji, which was his Yang Shan's personal name. Weiji, yes, said Yang Shan. And then Guishan says, there, you're out. And at that moment, he got it. You're out, you're out, you're out, 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 out. So, and later, Yang Shan would tell us the story when he had his own temple. He'd tell this story saying, I kind of grasped what it was at Danyuan's place, but I really grasped how it works at Guishan's. And so I think, when you come into a meeting, an interview, that field of uncertainty is right there and you don't know and you might get thrown out. And that's wonderful. And if you haven't been thrown out of Dokusan, you're not really trying. so it's okay, and that's what this kind of bell, this is the little bell I was talking about last night. It usually has a tone that's not that sweet, actually, or at least mine. Somebody made this, and they handmade this for me, kind of clanging. Yeah, so the bell. It's all right, and there's no past or future. You're just here facing the great question. How do you get the goose out of the bottle? How do I get out of the bottle? And you can tell that each of the great koans, all of the koans I read last night when I read all the miscellaneous koans, they're each a kind of gateway, and they're each address the whole problem of the First Noble Truth. Why do we suffer, die, and whatever else we do? Go wherever we have to go after we die. Why all that problem? And each of the koans addresses that, and whatever one sees as you belongs to you. Or put it the other way around, you belong to the koan. And there's no sequence of time when it's like that, and it's just the exhilaration and the eternal and the eternal and the eternal is here, and the infinite is here over and over again. And finally, I have a kind of silly story that a friend told me about this koan. And this is Lonnie, who's in this meeting, I think. And she said that she remembered a thing that happened when she heard the talk about the goose in the bottle. She remembered a thing. I hope you don't mind me telling this, Lonnie, because it's such a sweet story. and she was maybe 7 or 8, and her best friend, who was smaller than me, had spent the night. And I had to borrow a pair of my undies for school the next day. But they were too big for her, and she had to keep hiking them up and holding on to them. Finally, when we were walking her home, they slid down around her ankles, and to my utter amazement, she simply stepped out of them and kept walking and didn't look back, like the goose was out of the bottle. that image was with me for years and became a sort of metaphor for getting out, for letting go. But I'd forgotten it until that feeling, the effortless sense of freedom which comes from getting out of the bottle, stepping out of the bowl. How lovely to step out of what doesn't fit, what isn't working, and what I have to constantly hold on to. So thank you, Lonnie. It's like, and such a kid thing, isn't it? Yeah, it's so great. So a woman raised a goose in a bottle, and as it grew, she wanted to get it out of the bottle. How will you get it out of the bottle? I think the thing to say or the thing to consider is that we don't have to reach here, or if we're reaching, I'm always thinking it's what we're reaching for, but great Yun Men said, give me the reaching. And so it's the one who's troubled, who's trying not to be troubled, that's the one. That's the Buddha. The one who feels like, I've nearly got it, I'm about to be there, that's the Buddha. The one who thinks, this is completely hopeless and they've deluded me, that one is the Buddha. So, and one of the things I found is that, as well as that thing, not to think that this isn't it. The definition of suffering is, this isn't it. Right? We know that. So don't think, I should have gone and listened to a different band. I should have, whatever it is, got a different lover. I should have had a different breakfast. I should be having different feelings and thoughts in the middle of the night. Have what you have, a grand thing. Not to be afraid of the Buddha nature you have right now. Good night and sweet dreams, and you'll notice your koan might be in your dreams, and even while you're asleep. And when you wake up, don't think your koan is not keeping you company.
To support these episodes or learn more about upcoming programs and retreats at Pacific Zen Institute, visit us at pacificzen.org. You'll find details on John Tarrant's Sunday talks, our Open Temple morning meditation, and our Zen Luminaries series featuring intimate conversations with scholars, poets, and teachers of Koan Zen. Thanks for listening.